Someone was living inside my walls, watching me every night. 3 weeks ago, I started hearing scratching sounds inside my walls, and at first, I didn't think much of it. Old buildings always have noises, pipes shifting, wood expanding, rats moving through spaces you can't see. That's what I told myself every time the sound came back. Quiet and deliberate, just loud enough to be noticed, never loud enough to prove anything was wrong. My name is Michael Carter, and I've lived in this apartment for almost 2 years. It isn't luxurious, and it certainly isn't new, but it was affordable, quiet, and perfect for someone like me who worked from home. The building itself was old enough to carry a certain weight to it. Thick walls, tall ceilings, long hallways that always seemed dim, even during the day. At night, the silence inside the building felt different from normal silence. It wasn't peaceful, it was heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding on to sounds from years ago. The first time I heard the scratching was on a Tuesday night. I was sitting on my couch, laptop resting on my knees, finishing a late project. The room was lit only by a small desk lamp, casting long shadows across the living room wall. That was when the sound appeared, a soft scratch. Barely noticeable, like someone dragging a fingernail lightly across wood. I froze immediately. Not because I was afraid, but because the sound felt intentional. I tilted my head and listened carefully, holding my breath without realizing it. The room returned to silence so quickly that I almost convinced myself I imagined the noise entirely. I exhaled slowly and shook my head. Rats. That was the only explanation that made sense. But the following night, the sound returned, this time 3 scratches in a row, evenly spaced, slow and steady, not random, not chaotic, rhythmic. I set my laptop aside and stood up, walking toward the wall behind my tall bookshelf. I pressed my palm against the surface, expecting to feel vibrations or movement. There was nothing, just cold, unmoving wood beneath my hand. Still, something about the sound didn't feel right. And that was when the unease began. Over the next several nights, the scratching became a pattern. It never happened during the day. It never happened in the early evening. It always began late, long after midnight, when the building had settled into complete silence. At first, I ignored it. Then, small changes started happening. Subtle things. Things so small that anyone else might have overlooked them. One morning, I noticed the kitchen cabinet slightly open. Not wide, not obvious, just enough to make me pause and stare at it longer than necessary. I distinctly remembered closing it the night before. Another day, the dining chair near the table had shifted slightly from its usual position. Not dramatically, just a few inches. I told myself I must have bumped into it earlier, but deep down, I knew something wasn't adding up. Then came the glass. That morning looked completely ordinary at first. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, casting pale light across the counter. I walked into the kitchen, still half awake, expecting to start my usual routine, and that's when I saw it. A glass of water sitting perfectly in the center of the counter, half empty. I stopped walking immediately. The sight was simple, ordinary, harmless. Yet it felt deeply wrong. I stared at the glass for several seconds, waiting for memory to catch up with reality. Had I left it there? Had I woken up during the night and forgotten? I tried to replay the previous evening in my mind. Dinner, dishes, locking the door, turning off the lights. But the more I searched my memory, the more certain I became. I never leave glasses out overnight. Never. That realization hit harder than the sound ever had, because it meant one thing. Someone else had touched something inside my home. That was the moment fear truly began. Not loud fear, not screaming fear. Quiet fear, the kind that creeps into your thoughts and stays there, whispering questions you can't ignore. That night, I didn't sleep much. Every sound felt amplified. Every shift of the building made my heart race. Shadows looked deeper, darker, heavier than usual. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence like it might break open at any second. Then, sometime close to 2 in the morning, the scratching returned. Slow, deliberate, closer than before. I sat upright in bed instantly, my pulse pounding against my ribs. That was the moment I realized ignoring this situation wasn't an option anymore. The following morning, I went to the store and bought a small security camera. Nothing fancy, just something simple enough to capture movement inside the living room while I slept. I told myself it was temporary, just until I proved everything was normal. But deep down, I already suspected the truth would be anything but normal. When I returned home, I placed the camera carefully on top of my bookshelf, angling it toward the section of the wall where the scratching always originated. For the first time in days, I felt a small sense of control, a small sense of relief, because now, if something was happening, I would finally see it. Night 1 passed without incident. Nothing. Night 2, silence again. I started to feel embarrassed for worrying so much. I even laughed at myself once, convinced stress had played tricks on my mind. Until the third night. At exactly 2:14 a.m., my phone vibrated violently on the bedside table. Motion detected. My heart jumped instantly. I grabbed the phone and opened the camera feed with shaking hands. The screen loaded slowly, revealing the dark outline of my living room. At first, everything looked completely still. The couch remained in place, the table stood untouched, the shadows were exactly where they should be. Then something shifted. Not from the door, not from the window, from the wall, right behind the bookshelf. I leaned closer to the screen, my breath shallow, my pulse echoing in my ears. The bookshelf trembled just slightly, barely noticeable, but enough to confirm what I was seeing. And in that moment, a realization struck me with terrifying clarity. The sounds I had been hearing for weeks weren't coming from inside the wall. They were coming from someone living inside it.